What's up, guys? This is Khan, the director of Illustrious, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on how builds go together. I've noticed that a lot of people, in general, they tend to run very odd things. Like, for instance, let's look at this guy, right? He has a lot of contradicting things on his build. That's just, a lot of players, even, 2 and 300s, tend to make these issues. Um, yeah, see, like, just weird things on the build. So, because of that, I figured I'd go ahead and explain how I and many of the members of Illustrious put together our builds. Um, this comes from a lengthy amount of testing as well as a lot of in game experience. Almost everyone that we're getting our information from here is well into the hundreds, and there are a few people that are just extremely good at PvP. So, I guess let's start off with what should be your loadout, right? Your ability loadout. So, your Deadeye is going to be central to whatever you're going to do, right? You can pick whichever Deadeye card you want, with the exception, I believe, of a Moment to Recuperate. A Moment to Recuperate is just not worth taking right now. But let's build one of my favorite builds, which is a Focus Fire damage build. So we want to synergize things with Focus Fire, which gives us damage. Now there are two ways to do this. We can fill in the parts of it that are lacking, being defensive, or we can fill in the parts of the build that are going to be... Basically, we can either stack more damage or more defense on any build. And that's how most of it works. Sometimes you need regen, but it's very rare in any PvP-centered build. With Focus Fire, the build that I normally run, you'll notice that on almost any build I run, I'll have Sharpshooter and Peak Condition. Peak Condition is not essential with the build I'm going to be building here, but it helps you blow through things. The same is true here. If I was going to make a tankier setup, I would go with Iron Lung. But if I was going to do a damage setup, which is what I'm going to do, I would go with Landon's Patience most of the time, but Winning Streak if I'm encountering tank builds. That's just the way that it all evens out. With this particular build, at max damage, you can blow through tier 1 tonics, and sometimes you can blow through like 90% of a tier 2. It lets you kill players consistently. This is a rolling block setup. So, like for this setup, for instance, I would go over to my wheel, and I would want my rolling block and my double barrel, as well as my navies. The reason for that being, they're all relatively slow-firing weapons, comparable to the others in their class. Navies hit very hard. They 2-tap untonic players with Focus Fire. The rolling block will 1-tap just about anybody if I Focus Fire up on this off of respawn. The double barrel, due to its nature, synergizes very well with Landon's Patience, so we use it. I have Bolas on here to counter slip. Same with the Tomahawk, or Hatchet. Now, when you're looking at your build, what you're trying to figure out is how do all of these cards synergize, right? And for me at least, the best thing is to get as many passive bonuses to your build as possible. The reason that either Peak Condition or Iron Lung are on all of my builds, literally every single one, is because they're passive. You don't have to do anything for them to proc. Like, okay, so let's take a look at Winning Streak, because Winning Streak is really common, right? Winning Streak is not a bad card, but its only real utility is against tank builds. And if you miss a shot, then you're losing damage. Meaning that it doesn't let you have utility. It doesn't give you consistency. And that's key in maintaining your playstyle, right? Like, you want as many passives as possible. So let's take a look at the tank build, for instance, right? So with slow and steady, right? That's what you're going to build off of. there's no real point in using slow and steady unless you're going to stack tanking on top of it. Because slow and steady by itself is weaker than a tier 3 tonic. If you're going to just use slow and steady and no defensive cards, you may as well just run tier 3 tonics. That's the way it is. So, we stack on cards that synergize with it. So Fool Me Once, because every time you get shot, you're going to take less damage. So that stacks. Iron Lung, because you take less damage overall. And then you would probably want to take Sharpshooter, although I know that now with certain outfits you can use Never Without One. That would give you a potent setup. It gives you tankiness on tankiness. That's kind of what I'm talking about with builds. And you have to know what guns synergize with what build. The easiest thing to know for any build whatsoever, if you're using sniper rifles, right? Sharpshooter by itself with the rolling block will let you one-tap untonicked players. But with the Carcano, that isn't the case. That's with express ammunition, by the way. Secondly, for the Carcano, having Sharpshooter and Peak Condition together with nothing else will let you one-shot untonicked players. Unless they have Iron Lung and Never Without One on, or Iron Lung or Never Without One. Either of those cards are very strong passive defenses. It's my opinion that Iron Lung is one of the best cards in the game because it makes it to where this common strategy of getting one-shots doesn't work anymore. It throws a lot of people off. Now, let's say, I'm not the biggest fan of paint, but let's say you were going to run paint, right? Paint it black is already an extremely lethal card. You can stack damage on it, but quite honestly, there's no reason to. If you're stacking damage on Paint It Black, it means you're running up against tank builds. And in my opinion, if you're running up against that many tank builds, you should swap over to Focus Fire, or you should swap to a tank build or Slip. Because of that, when I run Paint, I like to run this setup, where we run Fool Me Once, Iron Lung, and then we want to either, this is a choice you have here, you can either run Eye for an Eye for less Deadeye usage, Strange Medicine so that you get health back, Gift of Focus, wait, not Gift of Focus, sorry, Kick in the Butt, because you're going to get shot more often, or what I really recommend is that you run Never Without One. This gives you a lot of tank and a lot of paint capability. With the Carcano combination that we just mentioned, this makes it a 3-shot if you have a tier 1 tonic up. Which is... that's a lot. That's what a max damage build can do to a tank build. Most people don't run max damage either. Now, all of that said, whatever works for you is going to work for you. You know, I mean, like I said, everyone has preferences. But when you stack your abilities appropriately, then you don't have to worry as much about the differences in utility. You want abilities that either stack with each other or complement each other. Either or. So... what I'm really trying to say here is make sure you've got yourself loaded up in a way that isn't dangerous to you. Make sure that when you are going to use the rolling block, for instance, don't run a full defensive setup. If you're going to do something like that, you need a Carcano. Because your Carcano is going to 2-tap most players without defensive cards. But your rolling block is also going to do that, but it fires slower. You have to be aware of all of your equipment, is all I'm saying here. That's really it for this one, guys.